So we're shooting, and this person suddenly got annoyed at, people talking while we were shooting, which is bad.
She kept quiet for decades. But now at 57, Julia Roberts finally broke the silence, and Hollywood wasn't ready for what she revealed. The beloved Pretty Woman star, long known for her megawatt smile and graceful poise, stunned the industry by naming 5 actors she absolutely hated sharing the screen with. She didn't soften the blow. No vague hints, no polished PR answers, just raw honesty. From temper tantrums and inflated egos to a total lack of professionalism, Roberts painted a picture that shattered illusions about some of Hollywood's biggest names. In the golden glow of Tinseltown, romances are rewritten, endings reshot, and truths buried beneath red carpets. But for Julia, one story refused to stay hidden, not because it was scandalous, but because it marked a personal reckoning. It wasn't the fairy tale many expected. It was the chapter that forced her to confront the darker side of fame. The year was 2001. The location? Las Vegas. The film? Ocean's 11. Julia arrived on set thinking she was stepping into a glamorous, carefree caper. What she walked into, however, was something entirely different. She walked onto set expecting long hours and polite co-stars, not George Clooney. Not the tabloid darling or the red carpet icon, but the quiet man behind the charm. The one who handed her coffee before sunrise, who made her laugh when exhaustion turned to smudged mascara and silence. Their connection didn't demand attention. It thrived in the stillness. Through late-night script swaps, long pauses charged with unspoken words, and a single message that lingered. Thinking about you. That text rewired something inside her. Suddenly, the world beyond the spotlight didn't seem so far away. She began to dream. Not of premieres or awards, but of quiet mornings by Lake Como, where no one asked for autographs and time moved like honey. But heartbreak doesn't always slam the door, it sometimes tiptoes in. One ordinary afternoon, she picked up a Vanity Fair spread and froze. There he was, grinning, magnetic, and quoting lines that weren't just lines to her. "Julia is amazing," he said. "She acts well and kisses even better." The tabloids ate it up, but what the world missed was the weight behind that kiss. To her, it wasn't performance, it was real. That moment on screen, she'd stopped acting, she'd let go. But while she held on to the memory like a secret, George didn't. What came next wasn't a scandal splashed across the front page, it was worse. In a closed-door meeting, Clooney revealed a private photo, one taken in an unguarded moment, offset, quiet and tender, and handed it to a producer without her knowing. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was exposure in its rawest, cruelest form. Not a headline, not a scandal, just a single, ice-cold fax that said everything without needing to scream. Julia Roberts had been betrayed, not in a tabloid-worthy explosion, but in the quietest, most calculated way. It wasn't about love gone wrong or fame gone sour. It was about power. Pure, deliberate control. He didn't need her affection. He needed leverage. Directing was the prize, and Warner Brothers had put $2 million and a shot at reinvention on the table. To prove he could spark headlines, he used her as his fire starter. But Julia didn't rage. No press tours, no late-night jabs, no tear-streaked interviews. She responded like only someone deeply hurt would. Cool, clean, and done. Her fax simply read, "Thank you for making me famous by killing me." And with that, she vanished from the sequel to Ocean's 12, citing scheduling. But insiders knew it wasn't her calendar that was full. It was her heart that had cracked. From then on, they lived like ghosts in the same industry. No eye contact at events, no nostalgic hugs at award shows. It was as if the entire experience had been packed away, sealed in a vault labeled Betrayal. To some, it may have seemed like just another Hollywood fallout. But for Julia, who had dared to trust in a town of performances, it was something deeper. Not just a kiss sold to the media, but a soul traded for ambition. Years later, when asked if she ever considered walking away from Hollywood, she gave a quiet smile and said, "Only once." Then she paused. "When I thought I'd found something more honest than the screen." She never said his name. She didn't have to. Anyone who had followed the story knew exactly who she meant. Meryl Streep once called Julia sunlight bottled in a star. And in the haze of early 90s fame, she truly was. Glowing, unstoppable, iconic. But even stars burn out when the people they trust block out the light. She wasn't just chasing fame, she was hungry for transformation, for depth, for meaning that would echo beyond the screen. In the heart of 1991, she felt she had stumbled onto that rare chance to do exactly that. Without fanfare, a rough and riveting script arrived. A chilling tale rooted in the forgotten manuscript of a European survivor of war, buried in a cold, aristocratic silence. No glitz, no red carpets, just a haunting truth that echoed through Julia's core. She didn't want to simply act in the project. She wanted to breathe life into it, to become part of its soul. Teaming up with the script's original author, an outsider to Hollywood's glossy machine, she began crafting something intimate. Over the next 7 months, Julia immersed herself fully, tracing every fracture of the woman's unraveling mind. From locked-away memories to the quiet gasps of emotional suffocation, she mapped every layer. Behind closed doors, she rehearsed raw monologues, tapped into therapy tools, and even took the reins as a producer. With a small, fiercely devoted team around her, Julia worked towards something that felt pure. She envisioned it as her evolution. Not a playful rom-com lead, but a truth-bearing, Oscar-caliber force. Then, without warning, everything fell eerily quiet. Originally titled Ashes of the Rose, the film began its hunt for investors in the latter part of 1991. Studios peeked at the idea, but hesitated, unsure how to market such a grim, unconventional story. Despite the hesitations as meetings unfolded, one copy of the private development script somehow landed in unexpected hands. It reached Creative Artists Agency (CAA), the powerhouse also guiding the careers of both Julia Roberts and Meryl Streep. 2 months later, Julia didn't get a call. She got blindsided by a headline. A film titled The Last Silence had just been greenlit, echoing her project's very bones. The plot? A European woman haunted by war returns to face an emotionally suffocating family legacy. The lead? Not her, but Meryl Streep. The role Julia had poured herself into now belonged to someone else. And just like that, the story that was supposed to transform her was no longer hers. The new team came in like a storm. Fresh producers, a renamed project, and a screenwriter Julia barely recognized. Her own name? Gone. The title she helped shape? Rebranded. The original script, the one she had poured herself into, had been gutted. The writer she collaborated with had been quietly paid off and buried under a mountain of NDAs. The film launched with a new face and a new name. Marielle's personal passion, as if Julia had never existed in the story at all. She didn't just take a role, Julia whispered years later to a close friend. She stole a piece of my life. The betrayal hit harder than any headline. Julia spiraled. For the first time in her career, she vanished from every spotlight. No red carpets, no interviews, no upcoming projects. She canceled film after film, ignored calls, shut the door on Hollywood itself. Friends described her as shadowed, broken, changed. The trauma settled in her body. Insomnia, panic attacks, cold sweats in the middle of the night. Even hearing Marielle's name on television sent her fleeing the room, sometimes in tears. It wasn't just about Marielle. Julia blamed the whole machine, the agents who double-dealt, the producers who chased prestige over principle, and the actress who stepped into her dream without blinking. I don't hate her because she's talented, Julia confided, voice low and steady. I hate her because she knew I bled to build that. And she walked right over it like it was nothing. She never told the story publicly. In Hollywood, calling out a bigger name can be career suicide. But those close to the industry knew her disappearance wasn't a mystery. Her silence was deliberate. For nearly a year, she avoided drama scripts entirely. And when the offers returned, especially those that included Marielle, her answer never wavered. Only if it's in the contract. Every line, every scene, every boundary. From that day on, Julia swore she would never be unprotected again. It wasn't the betrayal that broke her, it was the aftermath. Every contract she signed afterward came with shackles, creative limits she never used to tolerate. She stopped improvising, stopped opening up on set, and built walls no director could scale. Her work remained exceptional, even award-worthy. But behind the eyes was something new, cold, sharp, unyielding. This wasn't just about acting anymore. It had reshaped her identity, deep into the bone. Marielle's name never passed her lips again, not in interviews, not even in passing. But those close to her knew, silence wasn't absence, it was armor. And nothing exposed that scar more publicly than the day she sat across from Joy Behar. It was supposed to be a morning of healing, not headlines. Julia Roberts, beloved, unguarded, real, had agreed to appear live on The View. No edits, no retakes, no handlers to soften the blows. She came with sincerity, ready to speak from the heart. Motherhood under a spotlight. The private grief of losing her mom, the loneliness behind fame, But just after 11 a.m., something shifted. The studio looked cheerful on the surface, but unease buzzed underneath. Julia began with tenderness, recalling her mother's resilience, her sacrifices, her smile. Viewers leaned in. The audience held its breath. Then came Joy. With a smirk, she asked, "Would you say your fame is more about your body and lips than your actual ability?" The studio fell still. Julia didn't blink, didn't laugh, didn't bite back. She simply let the silence hang, thick, unrelenting. It was louder than any words she could have spoken. And in that moment, the entire world heard everything. Once known for her fearless wit and biting humor, Joy went too far this time. Silence blanketed the set as the other panelists sat frozen, unable to rescue what had clearly shifted from playful banter to a pointed attack disguised as a joke. It wasn't only what she said, it was how she delivered it, with a sly grin and a voice heavy with insinuation, turning her words into accusations wrapped in mockery. Julia locked eyes with her, expression fixed and lips sealed. The broadcast captured the instant her face shifted, from cordial tolerance to a pained, icy stare. Then came a quiet murmur, almost lost to the room, yet clear. "You're turning me into something to laugh at, just a smiling body." The room held its breath. With unsettling grace, Julia detached her microphone. She rose without haste, gave the audience a brief, unreadable look, and stepped away. There were no theatrics, no tears, just her silent refusal to continue the charade. No commercial rolled, only the clumsy scramble of hosts fumbling for a transition that wouldn't come. The footage spread like wildfire, and by night's end, a digital firestorm had erupted. Social media fractured into factions. Some called Joy brave, unfiltered, true to her trademark edge. Others slammed her, accusing her of using sisterhood as a weapon, turning feminism into a farce. "She didn't invite Julia to share. She invited her to bleed," tweeted one user. "Joy did what Hollywood men have done forever, chopped a woman down to her body," another post read. "Still, get over it" trended, a cruel reminder of how often society expects women to swallow humiliation and keep smiling. Julia stayed silent for months. No interviews, no side comments, no clues, until she re-emerged quietly and powerfully. A simple video appeared one slow Sunday, with no filters, no fanfare. Wearing a plain gray sweater and no makeup, she looked into the camera without a trace of a grin. "All my life, people have told me to smile," she began. "Smile on premieres. Smile when reporters shout questions. Smile when they probe into your weight, your family, your worth." Her voice never wavered. "I came to speak as a human being, not as material for a cheap laugh. I can't move on from being made to feel like meat on Hollywood's chopping block," she added. "Joy, to me, isn't just a host with a mic. She's someone who made a public execution feel like an interview." Her words struck with thunderous clarity. This wasn't about a single exchange. It was about the long-standing erosion of dignity behind celebrity smiles. In that moment, Julia became something more. She stood for every woman ever dismissed under the excuse of humor. Her quiet fury echoed loudly, more than any scripted apology ever could. In the aftermath of the incident, Joy addressed the controversy with a vague apology that felt more like justification than regret. "I assumed we were bouncing off each other for laughs," she remarked on a later episode of The View, downplaying the moment. By then, however, the harm had already settled in. Julia's quiet exit wasn't loud or performative. It resonated precisely because it wasn't. It stood not as a reaction, but as a silent line drawn in protest. For many women watching, that moment spoke volumes. It was less about the names involved, Julia Roberts or Joy Behar, and more about the countless times women have had to absorb disrespect without flinching. This time, Julia broke the cycle. She didn't nod or appease, she stood up and removed herself. That departure etched itself into the minds of viewers, possibly even Joy herself. Bradley Cooper, the once golden boy of American charm, carried a different meaning in Julia's memory. To her, he would become a symbol of layered betrayal hiding beneath boyish charisma. Years after it all unfolded, Julia confided in a friend, explaining it wasn't just about physical intimacy. He hadn't merely lured her into his world, he pulled her into headlines, into the spotlight, and into a shame that didn't feel earned. Back in 2010, Julia had been reaching for something bigger, not just a performance, but a vision. The Art of Falling was deeply personal to her, a stripped-down romantic drama that peeled back emotional complexity. She wasn't just acting, she was shaping the project from the inside out. Script tweaks, character arcs, casting sessions. She was involved in every choice. What she craved was something unfiltered, even uncomfortable in its honesty. And that's when Bradley Cooper entered the picture. Coming off the success of The Hangover, he was all anyone could talk about in the industry. He had the charm, the confidence, and a desire to be taken more seriously. When he stepped in for a casual read-through, Julia later said the atmosphere shifted instantly. Technically, it wasn't even meant to be an audition, but as one of the producers recalled, his energy felt potent, disarming even. He had a way of locking eyes with her that made it feel like they shared an invisible thread. From casual sparks, things escalated quickly. There were coy messages, impromptu rehearsals, and conversations that slipped past the script. Julia found herself drawn in, not recklessly, but with a cautious sense of hope. Right from the casting decision, eyebrows lifted when she chose Bradley for the lead instead of more seasoned veterans. Her agent, concerned, asked cautiously, "Is this really the right call?" hinting at Bradley's rawness and unchecked drive. Still, Julia leaned into her instincts, feeling confident, until that trust became her most significant career mistake. As production got underway, the smallest signs of trouble began creeping in. Bradley, now basking in sudden attention, began whispering stories to the press. Initially, it felt like harmless buzz, rumors of chemistry on set, playful images of the two during breaks. But soon, things took a darker turn with private images surfacing from restricted areas. Gossip columns exploded with claims of a steamy romance. These weren't casual snapshots the cinematographer later shared. Only an insider could have pulled this off. Julia called him out directly. His answer, cocky and dismissive, "This is how the game is played, Jules." But that wasn't the end. He kept pushing. Halfway through filming, he started lobbying for changes to his role. Originally written as layered and tragic, his character was slowly rewritten to be more charming and noble. Julia resisted with everything she had, but tweaks kept slipping through. The script was reshaped, more screen time, added heroism, and a finale centered on him. Then came the betrayal that broke everything. Alone in her trailer one evening, Julia stumbled across a secret audio file. He had recorded a quiet, vulnerable conversation they'd shared without asking. "Research for the role," he explained as if that made it acceptable. Julia didn't flinch. Her decision came instantly. He was scrubbed from press tours, removed from future sequel plans. By the last day on set, the mood was bitter and brittle. Julia did her job, but the trust was irreparably shattered. She never mentioned him publicly again, and when asked about regrets in later years, she always answered quickly. "There were men who broke my heart," she admitted, "but Bradley Cooper broke my trust in myself." It wasn't a love lost, it was self-respect traded to a man hiding behind performance. The Art of Falling premiered in late 2011. Critics praised it, audiences applauded Julia's haunting performance, but those who knew, they understood it wasn't just a film, it was a wound. And behind every frame was a woman who had trusted too much, given too freely, and learned the price of instinct when it's placed in the wrong hands. A continuation was never pursued. Even now, whenever Bradley Cooper's name is casually dropped during interviews, Julia only responds with a knowing smile, a gentle pause, and a swift pivot to another subject. Back in the frosty months of early 2005, Julia veered away from her commercial roots. That winter, she agreed to star in a gritty psychological indie drama led by the famously intense Penn, a man celebrated as much for his visionary filmmaking as for his erratic temperament. Penn, during that phase, was enjoying widespread critical success. His reputation for pushing the limits of emotional depth and cinematic realism made the upcoming project feel both risky and thrilling. This film promised a bold departure. It was a quiet, cerebral descent into the haunted corridors of grief, fractured memories, and blurred sanity. Exactly the kind of challenge Julia had been waiting for. Yearning to evolve beyond the America's sweetheart typecast, Julia wasn't aiming for shock value. Instead, she wanted to earn her reinvention with complex, vulnerable storytelling rooted in restraint. From the start, Julia drew her boundaries in ink. She made it explicitly clear there would be no nudity, no explicit scenes, and no compromise on her personal limits. The paperwork reflected this firmly. What originally landed on her desk was a script that resonated, emotive, layered, and above all, respectful. Rather than focus on physical exposure, the story revolved around a woman gradually unraveling from the inside out. Julia put her trust in the vision. She trusted the director's intention. But more than anything, she held faith that someone as seasoned as Penn wouldn't misuse the very vulnerability she was courageously placing on screen. Yet what unfolded next would become a silent wound. a private trauma that Julia never openly discussed, though it forever altered her perception of Hollywood. Production wrapped in 42 tightly packed days of filming. Through freezing nights and soul-draining takes, she remained calm and disciplined, unaware of the hidden storm ahead. Post-production brought whispers. Behind the locked editing doors, rumors swirled. Claims of a raw, unfiltered Julia scene surfacing in a foreign cut of the film. At first, she dismissed the talk as Hollywood noise. But then, deep into the night, her longtime agent rang her with disturbing news. Somewhere in Europe, a version of the film had leaked. It featured a scene of Julia, fully exposed from behind, caught mid-change. No acting, no plot, just naked vulnerability. The footage, taken without her consent, came from a hidden angle. No dialogue, no purpose, just a stark breach of trust. Julia's reaction was instant, rage and heartbreak tangled into one. She confronted Penn directly, demanding that the footage be removed from every version and invoking the clear terms of her contract. But the reply she received knocked the wind from her. With a cold indifference, Penn reportedly replied, "Truth is what audiences want, and your body speaks an undeniable truth." The words weren't just dismissive, they were cutting. He had twisted her very essence, her agency, into a pawn for some twisted version of cinematic purity. Truth, he claimed. But for Julia, it was nothing short of betrayal disguised in artistic jargon. That night, she collapsed in grief during a call with a close friend, her voice trembling as she described the betrayal. The damage wasn't just in the scene, it was in how little her voice had mattered. Despite being known for fiercely protecting her personal life, especially during her peak years, what happened behind the scenes was an unforgivable violation. Even though she cried privately, the situation remained unchanged. The American theatrical release was subtly altered. Key moments were either blurred out or omitted entirely. However, when the film crossed borders into international markets, the unedited version remained untouched. No disclaimer was ever issued, no clarification was offered, and no remorse was expressed. Lawsuits were never filed, and she chose silence over scandal. According to those close to her, she feared the stigma of being labeled difficult, a career killer for many women in Hollywood. Instead of fighting back publicly, she buried the humiliation and tried to move forward. When the press tour began, she met reporters with grace and composure. She spoke glowingly about the storyline and cast. But when it came to discussing the director, she stayed completely silent. Eventually, time moved on. The film became a forgotten project, a mere flicker in Julia's celebrated filmography. What didn't fade, though, was the emotional wound it left behind. At a quiet gathering with close friends in 2022, the truth finally spilled out in an unguarded moment. This wasn't said on a red carpet, nor intended for any tabloid headline. It came during a quiet night of shared stories, dim lights, and red wine. Her voice trembled as she admitted, "If someone ever asks who I despise the most in the world, I wouldn't even blink before saying the name of the man who showed my body to the world without asking me first." Those painful words never hit the front page. Still, for everyone present, her anguish was impossible to miss. It wasn't just about being exposed, it was about having control stolen from her. The betrayal went far beyond a scene. It echoed the way powerful men can override even the most respected women. After that, she never collaborated with Sean Penn again. And though she kept accepting daring roles, her faith in the industry was never quite the same.